going to start with an apology. We've been beset with technical issues, I'm afraid. So we're having to change the order around. We've managed to accommodate most of the speakers for today's summit, but it's never good to start with an apology. But a very warm welcome and thank you for waiting to join the Mayoral HS2 for SMEs. Obviously, of the HS2 Growth Board for the Combined Authority. And one of the key stipulations when the government announced earlier this year the formal notice to proceed was that a large part of the HS2 project was to be done by Midlands businesses, hence this summit. And if we can just show the slide on proceedings for today, please, Kirsty, or Olivia. As you'll see, we have tried to structure this so that you get a good overview on the strategic content, the view from contractors and the view from those who are working with the opportunities that are arising and those who are supporting. And what I'd like to do is stress that if this is about you, this is a summit for you. So if you have any questions, please send them in. We're going to pick the questions up as we go through the summit, and we will answer as many of those questions as we can in the Q&A sessions, but every question will be answered. The brief from them to you.
Thank you, Steve. And yeah, let me talk a little bit of time of our rail network in the future. And we know if those of you would have travelled on the West Coast Main Line, or in fact any of the major north-south arteries in the peak, we are desperate for more capacity. So that's the fundamental premise and where HS2 came from. Travelling by train is by far away the greenest way to get around our country. It's 17 times greener than air flight and 7 times greener than travelling by car. And of course, it's damn sight quicker city to city. And those cities that have invested in high-speed countries that invested in high-speed railways have really seen the growth in their economies. And that really plays to the final point of this slide around connectivity. And when you connect major cities, particularly when you're able to take a high-speed rail connection into a city centre, and we're seeing that already clearly in the West Midlands, huge opportunities both in Manchester and Leeds, and where I'm sat today in our Euston office, there is a huge amount of ambition both with us, the DFT, and with the London Borough of Camden to transform this part of London. So all of the major cities that will be connected to our network will see better connectivity, and that connectivity drives investment, it drives regeneration, obviously plays very much to government's wider agenda around levelling up. And I think many of the people on this webinar will recognise the need for creating better balance in our economy and seeing investment into the Midlands and the north and away from London and the south east. If we just go to the next slide, just building that a bit in a bit more detail. Birmingham's at the heart of the network for a reason. That's where I was this morning. And as the slide and the colour, hopefully you can see the colour coding on the slide. We put a whole series of other major towns and cities within an hour of the Midlands. So in terms of investment and adding to that rebalancing agenda that I referred to, HS2 is key to driving productivity, driving economic growth. And of course, we've done some of this already, as we know, but we're seeing local economic plans sort of spring up in all parts of the route, where the investment in the railway and the connection into in around the stations will start to create very much that economic footprint which will balance. If we just go over the slide, just building on that again, some specific images for you here. I'll just wait for the slide to come up, particularly around Birmingham. So there's grand plans to create an area around the Curzon Street station, and we'll be looking to appoint a contractor to build that in the coming months. Around the Borsley Viaduct, we've seen how railway viaducts can create spaces for commercial, cultural and leisure uses. And there, Digbeth is clearly an area to one side there of the Curzon Street footprint on the southeast of the city, so where there's again a huge opportunity to fundamentally redefine that part of our city. So over 2 million square feet of commercial space. We think the number approaching 1,800 homes, number in excess of 16,000 jobs. So around the firm there alone, the prize for us is significant. Going to the next slide, I think the other thing we shouldn't lose sight of is that HS2 is a significant engineering and construction challenge. We already have somewhere approaching 450 apprentices, 500 apprentices on the scheme today. We have this target of 2,000. I think that will end up proving. And of course, we can't just jobs in around engineering and construction. There's a sort of raft of support services, and we're some that still get mobilised. We see them starting to sort of put on local welfare. So there's a whole sort of ecosystem and economy that is starting to spread from the investment in the supply chain HS2. And one of our biggest legacies will be to create opportunities for a much more diverse, relevant workforce, particularly around the Midlands, where, as I say, we're based, and increasingly our supply chain is based. Our intent is that some 70% of all the jobs we create on HS2 will be outside of London. So this is a huge prize for the country. Just moving on to the next slide, talk a little bit about the environment. It wouldn't have got lost on, I guess, many of this audience around some of the challenges we've had with protesters. Most of those are quite organised, local people. Inevitably, there are impacts to the environment in building a railway of this scale, but nevertheless, we're moving from 450,000 of those have been planted to date, 60 new ecology sites and wildlife habitat sites. And we're going to plant somewhere around 900 hectares of trees right along the loop. So to put that, what does that actually mean? That's somewhere around 1,000 football pitches of tree planting all alongside the railway. So we're very aware of our impact on the natural environment and our need to dial up our efforts to make sure that what we leave behind is something we can be proud of in coming months, particularly in regard to a couple of slides for me. Progress update. I think the stats are self-evident. We're very much now under construction on phase 1. The bill for phase 2A, so the section from the West Midlands up to Crewe, we've seen out all the other petitions, and subject to the sort of parliamentary process, we should be in a place to receive royal assent, if not later this year, certainly first thing in the new year, and we've very much moved to the new phase there. On phase 2B, the western leg, we are now developing the legislation for that, to deposit that bill in the House in the next sort of 18 months or so. To Sheffield, through the East Midlands, the interchange at Towton and up to Leeds is all being looked at as part of a wider integrated plan by government. So it's fair to say that we are now very much working on all fronts at HS2. Just sort of moving now specifically, I guess, to maybe some of the audience here in the supply chain, and start to tee up Rob, who's going to come on after me. We've let some, if we could just move to the next slide, that'd be great, thank you. So in excess of 2,000 organisations are already working on the programme. We have a target of the work our team has done in again, we're investing in the economy, and I think as the country recovers from and deals with the challenges and the headwinds that COVID is presenting us, HS2 and the investment in infrastructure probably is talked about. So I was going to say more. Rob will come on to a little bit more about sort of how to get connected. Steve, I know there's an intent to create opportunities for some questions, but we are looking to create some events now on both for organisations to meet bidders and buyers. And Rob will talk a little bit more about how we use our convening power as HS2 to bring the sort of tier one players that we would engage together and to create other organisations to connect to them. We're very aware from a lot of work we've done that it's crucial that we create a platform for small and medium-sized organisations to get connected to the tier ones, and whether that's organisations that we've already appointed or in fact those organisations that like to be bidding for our work. Using venues around Birmingham in particular, which have been quite successful, and creating a forum for that in those introductions is going to be crucial. And again, Rob will talk a little bit about more of that on the next slide in due course. Okay, my final slide is Steve, we've changed the order around, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour for, and the audience a bit of a flavour for what we've been up to HS2 in a challenging period for us. But Steve.
Got to go in 10 minutes. So just quickly, on the skills training, which is one of the common questions coming out of the Midlands SMEs, what's available to help businesses in actually developing their talent, both for what's needed now and in the future?
And what we have, I mean, there's a number of routes really. I mean, we have a job brokerage scheme which we can make some more available information available about. Obviously, we've worked quite closely with what was recently called the High Speed Rail College. It's now called the National College for Advanced Transport and Infrastructure. You know, we've identified sort of what our skills pipeline is, and we're working very much with our supply chain, Steve, to identify what their needs are. So, you know, we'd be keen to talk to organisations to understand what their particular challenges are, what particular areas of skills they want to develop. And, you know, we've got a skills and employment team that inside HS2 that works with a network of skills and employment leads inside our tier one supply chain that can then work with local business to see how we can sort of basically sort of buddy up and partner up to make sure we're pulling through then the local talent into either directly or indirectly into sort of what I call the HS2 family.
That's good. And just leading on from that, another good point that has been made, that clearly this is the biggest infrastructure project in the UK for the foreseeable future, but it will come to an end at some stage. Do you see businesses that engage and actually make the investments to engage with HS2, that there's a future for them in perhaps more high speed in this country and overseas?
Well, I mean, let's put into context the duration of HS2. I mean, at the moment, we're looking at a 20-year programme as we sit here today. It's going to take us 10 years to get the railway built between the West Midlands and London. We are only just now starting, as I said, coming the new year, getting into sort of what I call delivery for the 2A, which will take us at least probably another 10 years. And then the further phases further north will take us certainly into sort of 2040. So I think in terms of sort of the short to medium term, Steve, there's a significant pipeline of activity there. I think to your other point, you know, it's been interesting my time in this job now over 3.5 years. You know, we're a relatively small country. The whole network is about 550 kilometres. Spain has got the second biggest network in the world with 3,000 kilometres. The Chinese are approaching 30,000 kilometres of the high-speed railway. But it's interesting how much, you know, international interest there is in HS2, and you know, I think there's a recognition around the world that when the Brits build railways, they build them to last. We know we haven't built a railway north of London for Victorian times, and we're certainly seeing even Crossrail, despite some of its challenges, that there's a huge sort of export of capability from Crossrail overseas, and I would expect that to be exactly the same for high speed too. As we build up a sort of UK base of capability, I see that being a very marketable opportunity for us overseas.
We'll be interested. One of the points that has been made repeatedly is that it's important that a number of Midlands SMEs, as many as possible, are engaged on the Midlands part of the project. Do you actively monitor that to try and make sure that as good a job as is possible is being done?
Yeah, so we monitor all our SME involvement, and we're flying above our 70% target, or very close to it at the moment. I think the last count I remember, we had probably some 250 organisations in around the West Midlands working for us in one capacity. Again, Rob, I think you'll follow me, might have a bit more data to hand, but you know, certainly we're looking at our regional footprint, and obviously, notwithstanding this railways between London, Birmingham, and Manchester and Leeds, you know, I've visited organisations in Kent, in North Wales, in around the Midlands, in Yorkshire, in Gloucestershire. So, you know, this sort of network of organisations that are now supporting HS2 is very much a national network. But of course, I'd expect the West Midlands to play, you know, recognise that's at the heart of the railway and the heart of HS2, you know, to sort of, you know, be well placed to support us.
No, that's great. Well, Mark, I know we've had a few technical issues, but really appreciate you joining the summit. As you say, Rob is going to pick up some of the more detailed questions, and we may have a little more time to actually address that then. So for now, we'll close this first session. Thanks, Mark. I know you've got to disappear. You've got to go. So thank you again for your time. I just had a text that unfortunately the mayor's office, they are struggling. It's on a remote. Is Olivia there? Can you give me the update? Are we going to be joined by the mayor or not? Craig, can you hear me?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, they're still trying to patch Andy in. He's still trying to call in.
Right.
But
well, let's work on the basis that unfortunately the mayor won't be able to join us. Which actually, can I just say, I think it's a huge pity that technology has let us down, because Andy Street, and I've worked with him and seen him at close quarters in his role when he was chairman of the Greater Birmingham LEP, which as its centrepiece had HS2, which really did trigger the economic renaissance in this part of the world. And more latterly, as the mayor of the West Midlands, Andy was actually instrumental in the lobbying with senior politicians, senior civil servants, in actually getting HS2 across the line. He was on the Oakervee review, which you might recall, and it's through Andy's efforts that we're in this position where HS2 has gone from nothing but an idea 10 years ago to absolute reality now, and something which is going to create huge opportunities for the next generation. So what I suggest we do is, in the event Andy can't join us, and it's not looking good, he will write personally to everyone who's registered for the summit, and in that we'll share the slides that he was going to share with us today. So that closes the first section. I'd now like to move into the contractor session, and in this we've asked a couple of contractors who you'll see on your slides to give us their overview, and then we'll bring in an SME who's actually been very successful in engaging with these big beasts, as it were. So can we now move into Matthew, please? Matthew Munn from Balfour Beatty. Matthew, the floor is yours, sir.
there we go.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just sending a message to unmute me. Thanks very much for that. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Munn. I'm from Balfour Beatty Vinci. I'm head of supply chain management. I've been working now on the project for a little over 4 months. And I can tell you there's a huge task ahead, and it's really interesting hearing from Mark, and we're going to hear from Rob in a moment, the work that has already been done to engage local and SME businesses. I work for Balfour Beatty Vinci, who look after the main civils contract for Area North. Sorry, can someone just make sure my slides are coming up, please? Thank you. If you could flick to the next slide, please. Brilliant. Thanks very much. So, who's Balfour Beatty Vinci then? Just go back one. Thank you. So, who's Balfour Beatty Vinci? So, Balfour Beatty Vinci, or BBV, as you'll often hear us referred to, are a joint venture, but we've actually been working successfully together on major civil engineering contracts for over 10 years. Principally building a series of major highway schemes up and down the UK, and also Crossrail stations. So the Vinci element of the joint venture brings a wealth of experience of building high-speed rail networks from the continent, and recently opened the Tours Bordeaux project. So we're pretty uniquely equipped, we think, as an organisation to deliver what is, widely renowned as one of the most challenging sections of High Speed 2. Our designers, Mott MacDonald Sistra, also a wealth of experience in designing high-speed rail networks across the continent. So all in all, a very strong team that's lined up to deliver, what is a very, very significantly challenging part of the scheme. We pick up the scheme just inside South Warwickshire, just south of Leamington Spa, and we build it all the way up to the outskirts of Solihull, where we'll connect into the Birmingham interchange station, and then we'll go west into the centre of Birmingham to connect up to Curzon Street station, as well as going north to just south of Rugeley, where we'll connect into the West Coast main line. You just flick onto the next slide, please. So this slide is just to give you an idea of the scale of the challenge and the scale of the works that we're going to be undertaking. So we're going to be designing and building in excess of 300 new assets, including 13 kilometres worth of viaduct and 132 number of bridges. So when I asked our team to do some digging for me on just how to put that into perspective, it really amounts to over 3 times the amount of steel that was required to build the Shard in London. So very, very significant engineering challenge we've got as a project, and obviously a huge amount of opportunity for local and SME businesses to be able to deliver a significant proportion of those assets. If we just click onto the next slide for me, please, Olivia. So not to dwell on this slide too long, but this is our high-level supply chain strategy, and at its very core, is that BBV are looking to develop the right supply chain partners with the right behaviours to enable us to create the most value for HS2 and its customers along the network. Core to this strategy is our ability to attract the right supply chain, and the right supply chain being as many local and SME businesses to work on the project throughout our tiers of our supply chain as possible, so we can make sure that in Area North we're absolutely a catalyst for growth in the local economy. Just come to the next slide for me, please, Olivia. Thank you. So there's a number of ways in which BBV are trying to maximise opportunities for local and SME businesses. One of which is through our partnership with the Diverse Supply Chains project, where we've been delivering multiple workshops and offering one-to-one support alongside High Speed 2, Birmingham City Council, NatWest and Aston University. Cohort 1 is just coming to a close at the end of 2020. Cohort 2 will be taking registrations in the very near future. So I'd encourage anybody, local diverse businesses that are on this summit this afternoon to go and take a look at that website and register your interest to see whether you might qualify for that level of support. There's also sort of grants and financial supports for qualifying businesses as well that come via the European Union Development Fund. So to date, BBV in phase 2 have placed over £40 million worth of contracts with businesses located within 30 miles of our part of the scheme, which is in excess of 25% of the contracts we've placed to date. To continue to have access to the best supply chain in the region, we open a very transparent procurement process, which I'm sure Rob will go into in detail as well, and so will Michael in a moment, whereby we advertise all of our opportunities to work for us directly on Compete For, and I'll touch on that again in a moment. Next slide, please, Olivia. So just as an overshot, fundamentally, BBV are going to spend somewhere in the region of £4 billion in the supply chain over the next 5 years. And this slide is just to give you an idea or taste of some of the services we'll be procuring in the coming months and years. So the critical thing for me to point out at this stage is that because the project is so vast and so huge, many of the direct opportunities to work in BBV may not be suitable for SME businesses. So it's very, very important that we work closely with our tier 1 contractors to make sure we maximise the opportunity and to flow down the onus and the requirements as we have done within their contracts to advertise their opportunities and their works packages in exactly the same way that we have via Compete For, and create that transparency. Not only that, over the coming months, and Rob will speak about the Meet the Contractor events that we've got planned with HS2 and the various other engagements that we have been doing with local chambers of commerce and so forth. We'll start to create more of a dynamic platform to connect our tier 1 contractors with local and SME businesses and really help facilitate that process. And we'll of course measure and monitor the amount of contracts and spend we're doing with local and SME businesses within the region. Next slide, please, Olivia. So just very finally from me, in terms of how to work for Balfour Beatty Vinci, all of our opportunities go through the Compete For portal. So if you haven't already, please make sure you go to Compete For and register your interest for the particular packages of works that you want to be notified have been advertised. That goes for every High Speed 2 contract up and down the trace, not just for Balfour Beatty Vinci. And as I said, we've mandated that for our tier 1 contractors to use as well. Construction Line is Balfour Beatty Vinci's chosen pre-qualification platform. We require all of our subcontractors to be Construction Line Gold status, and we also recognise the work that's been done in terms of the common assessment standard that will enable people with Achilles Building Confidence and CHAS pre-qualification to be able to transfer that across the construction line as well, to try and minimise costs and make sure that more SMEs have access to work for us as well. And just finally, we use an e-procurement platform, Jagger, which is a very simple sort of process, very transparent, to make sure that all the procurement activities are absolutely visible to High Speed 2 and to me and the senior leadership team within BBV, to make sure everything is absolutely spot on and we're maximising the amount of opportunities we're putting through that to local and SME businesses. And as a very sort of final part, if you haven't already, a great way to become High Speed 2 ready to be part of our supply chain would be to go and register yourselves and your business with the Supply Chain Sustainability School, take the self-assessment and start working through some of the modules and e-learning and lots of support that you'll get via that platform, and that'll really help you tune up on some of those things around social value and some of the things that we've heard from Mark Thurston say are absolute critical success factors for the project. So that's me. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Matt. I'll move straight into our next contractor and welcome Michael Sedgwick. We have Michael's slides. Michael, perhaps you could start off by explaining who are the big four behind the initials there, EKFB.
Yeah, no problem. Can you hear me okay, Steve?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Matt. There may be an element of repetition in this presentation, but there is some consistency that we want to have across messaging, in particular with the focus on around Compete For and the procurement process that we follow, which replicates a lot of what BBB are doing. So my name's Michael Sedgwick. I'm a supply chain manager for EKFB. My role is to lead the engagement with local business, SMEs, and also delivery in the legacy and benefit space of our contract. If we can flip to the next slide. So as Steve mentioned, 4 contracting partners. There's a little bit of echo actually. Go on mute. That's better.
Can everyone mute, please, if you're not already muted? Thank you.
Fantastic. So for JV partners, our journey as a joint venture actually started in 2016. I've worked on this contract for nearly 5 years. We're just at the stage of what I deem as proper operational delivery in terms of operational site type work. So it's been a a real journey and learning experience. We've gone through a number of different challenges, which Mark Thurston touched on in terms of the project's journey through Parliament and government. And our joint venture now is with 4 different parent companies. So Eiffage are a French civil engineering contractor, bring a huge amount of international expertise in high-speed rail delivery. Kia, most people probably know, a UK civil engineering and FM contractor. Ferrovial and BAM recently joined our joint venture. Ferrovial, a Spanish construction civil engineering contractor, and BAM, a UK-Dutch contractor. So we're now EKFB, and we start the delivery on our main works, main civils contract this year and into next year. So we can flip onto the next slide. I can talk a little bit about our scope. So slightly different geographically and in some of the work essentially that we're delivering. Our section of work is south of Birmingham. We start at Long Itchington, so the interface with BBV, a village called Long Itchington. And then we have an 80-kilometre earthworks package essentially that takes us all the way down to south of Aylesbury, just south of Wendover. Our route takes us through Buckinghamshire mainly and Oxfordshire. It also touches on Warwickshire and Northampton. And we split our section into 5 geographical projects, which have a mixture of earthworks and structures, which I'll detail on the next slide. If we could jump over, please. Just to touch on from a location point of view, we do have a head office in Birmingham city centre in Cornwall Street. We're looking at opening another main office in Milton Keynes, which will be the southern section of our route. And then in terms of the scope, so as mentioned, heavy earthworks, output-driven earthworks with civil engineering, significant structures. As you can see there, there's over 75 bridges, 17 viaducts. We'll excavate and move over 30 million cubic tons of soil and earth, the majority of which will be reused along our section of the route in landscaping. But really, our section is a massive earthworks program that is driven by the earthworks season. As we go into next year will be our first earthworks season. If we could flip on to the next slide, please. So very high level overview of our program, and I won't dwell on this too much. I've mentioned the key dates really, but this year for us is all about early preparation work. So we're mobilizing compounds. We're going through the main procurement of our strategic packages, and we're getting everything ready for what will be our main delivery year next year as we go into the first earthwork season next summer. We think at peak we're likely to employ 4,000 people in our section of work alone, and we're keen that we demonstrate that return on investment and that opportunity to local people and to local businesses. So it's absolutely crucial for us that we do absolutely everything we can to offer the opportunities to local business, to offer the opportunities to local people. And there's a lot of work that we've been doing over the last 12-18 months in that space around identifying businesses that potentially would benefit from work on the contract, equally supporting local people with upskilling and training. We've delivered a significant amount of training to local people focused around our works activities. So a lot of plant operator training, a lot of entry-level construction, CSCS type civil engineering entry-level qualifications. And just to note as well that our section of the work that we're delivering in the central section is the main civils contract. So we will do everything up to the point of laying the physical track. That comes after our contract, which is the track contract, and then the rail systems contract will come after us as well. We can flip on to the next slide. Just some detail and some data around the volume of major packages that we are procuring over the next 18 months. I think the point here is, and Matt mentioned it earlier, is we will procure these main contracts, but it's the opportunities that come alongside these major contracts where we're looking to support SMEs and local businesses. So although there's over 150 packages there's a significant amount more of opportunities for SMEs and local business that will come off the back of us awarding our main contracts, and we will be working with our strategic partners and our supply chain to ensure that those commitments and the process that we follow through Compete For and the balanced scorecards that we're working to define value and benefits, that is also delivered through our strategic partners to be able to demonstrate that return on investment to local business. Next slide, please. So again, just a bit of detail of the types of packages that we're working on at the moment. So as I mentioned, our contract is essentially a large earthworks package, so there's a significant amount of earthworks subcontract that we're going through. We are procuring some of our own plant as well, which is an interesting package. Huge amount of piling work, and then the associated labour that goes with the operational delivery of our site. But I think the point with this again, and if we just flick onto the next slide, I'm conscious that the majority of the information that we talk about and that we provide is around the civil engineering and the construction type delivery focused procurement that we will carry out. But really there's again a huge amount of opportunities for the ancillary type packages and services that will come from our contract. Everything that goes with managing a £2 billion project with potentially 4,000 people working on it, whether that's catering, facilities maintenance, transport, local building merchants. We're trying to capture all of the data and offer the opportunities up to local businesses. So there's a huge amount of engagement that we've done with local LEPs and local business groups. So there's obviously the West Midlands Combined Authority. There's Bucks Business First that we're doing a lot of work with. There's BIS Division. There's Coventry and Warwick Local Authority and LEPs. There's SEMLEP as well, that all sort of each have a touch point onto our contract. And I think a good example of potential opportunities that maybe aren't your traditional sort of construction type activities would be in the more leisure and tourism space. There's a significant opportunities for bed and breakfast, hotels and accommodation providers locally that maybe are going through a challenging time at the moment. And as we look to mobilise our workforce this year and into next year, we're looking at identifying local bed and breakfast and hotels and leisure and tourism type services that can support us with our workforce. Go into the next slide, please. Just a high level overview. I touched on it earlier, what we call our balanced scorecard. And this is really just to detail that price doesn't always win the work on this contract, and the deliverables that we're trying to work to from a value added proposition are absolutely crucial. So we've carried out a bit of a heat mapping exercise where we've assessed all of our packages and all of the works delivery to make an assumption on the likely impact that those packages would have on things like local business, local SMEs, minority business, upskilling of local people. And then we weight those packages according to the impact that they potentially could have. So recruitment and labour, for instance, is heavily weighted towards how we can support local people, how we can train local people, the benefits that we can show in terms of the opportunities, rather than it just being aligned to price. There's a huge amount of work that we've put in over the last 12, 18 months to get the procurement process in the right place. And you'll notice some sort of similar images there that Matt shared. So Compete For is absolutely key. So you'll hear it a few times from from us this morning that getting yourself registered on Compete For is absolutely crucial. That's where all of our opportunities will be advertised, and we'll be working with strategic partners to make sure that they're advertising their opportunities on there as well. And similarly to what Matt mentioned, trying to make the process as slick as possible using construction lines common assessment standard. We're conscious that some contractors may be working across different sections of the HS2 project, so being able to use that common assessment standard and Compete For and construction line will make that process hopefully a little bit easier for some of you guys that will be working across ourselves, BBV and Align and SCS as well. So into the last, or the penultimate slide. So again, Matt mentioned the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and we're in the process of developing a EKFB supply chain hub in partnership with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So this essentially will be a bespoke hub that our contractors and our businesses and local SMEs will have access to the content. All of Supply Chain Sustainability School's content is free, but there'll be some additional stuff that we'll be supporting with workshops or learning pathways around particular focus areas to support local businesses through their procurement journey. In terms of data, we've got 160 approved suppliers currently that are working on our contract. Just over 70% of those are SMEs. We anticipate over 500 contractors and supply chain partners that will be supporting us in the delivery of our project. Go on to the last slide, and it's repeating the Compete For message, a snapshot of our Compete For landing page. There's a whole host of information and support that's on our Compete For page that will support potential supply chain members and subcontractors with the information to give them the best opportunity during the tender process. And there's various events that are going on over the next sort of 6 to 12 weeks. Where I think Rob may touch on some of these. There's a HS2 Meet the Contractor, Meet the Buyer week, which is 23rd of November. We're doing a construction line Meet the Contractor event on the 5th of November, which I think it's worth people registering to attend that. It's a virtual event. And then there's a Rail Alliance Meet the Contractor event on the 18th of November, which again is worthwhile people attending if they're able to. So thank you, that's me.
Michael, thank you very much. I've been around this HS2 piece for over 10 years. Every time I hear a presentation like that, it just shows you the scope and the scale of what's happening on our doorstep. Now, I'm very pleased that we've heard from the two big contractors. We now have Natalie Buse joining us, who runs an SME in Coventry. And Natalie, over to you. We're really interested to hear what it's like actually dealing with these big boys. The floor's yours.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natalie Buse, and I'm Director and Senior Engineering Geologist at Concept. So, can we have the next slide, please, Olivia? Thanks. So I'm going to introduce Concept to you and then talk a little bit about our journey with HS2 and our future growth plans for Concept. So our core business is ground investigation. Olivia, can we have the next slide? That's it. Our core business is site investigation or ground investigation, and we investigate the ground prior to construction to establish the geotechnical parameters, and this includes the soil and rock, the groundwater, and the presence or absence of any contamination. We investigate the ground using a variety of drilling rigs to obtain samples for geotechnical logging and testing. The outcome of our investigations is to provide quality data for foundation design and construction design purposes. Can we move on, please, with it? We predominantly obtain samples from boreholes and char pits or trenches, And our samples are logged and tested in our in-house geotechnical laboratories. Sorry, can we move up? Thanks. So our intrusive investigations comprise drilling and boring of trial pits or trenches, and we also have non-intrusive surveys. All of the results of our operations on site result in samples collected, which we then test in our soil and rock laboratories. So, can we move on, Olivia? Thanks. So, as said, 20 years ago, we started with 2 employees, the founding members of Concept. And since then, 20 years down the line, we have, 20 years later, our staff has grown to around about 20 staff in 2017. And another 10 years on, we've had more than doubled our headcount. And we were beginning to turn over just short of £5 million. And as an SME, this was our journey with HS2. It began around about 2017. We were awarded our first HS2 work package for ground investigation in the southern section of HS2 Phase 1 in London. And this was predominant because our local resources were based in Acton with our yard depot and testing laboratory based there. We've recently been informed that we are a preferred contractor with HS2 Phase 2 near Lichfield. And this is based on our pipeline of work. We have a projected growth plan to achieve £15 million turnover and a headcount of 150 staff by 2025. And this growth is all based on our involvement with HS2. So if you could move on, please, Olivia. If we skip back to 2017, where our HS2 story began, we recognised that there was much ground investigation requirement and much ground investigation taking place in London for HS2. However, this was being done by major corporate ground investigation contractors, such as Socotec, Soil Engineering, Bashy Solitage, Fugro. All these major ground investigation contractors are backed by multi-million-pound group companies with turnovers in excess of £70 to £100 million. Yet, as an SME, we were certain that there was room for us in the market and a place amongst us, amongst these companies to deliver HS2 ground investigation. But to do this, we knew we had to be smart and we had to do our homework. We had to look at the HS2 requirements, not just in terms of the ground investigation, but in terms of quality, of service provision, of culture and value. We had to learn what was important to HS2, their principles and their targets and objectives, their values and what makes a difference to them and their scheme. We learned that HS2's principles and values weren't very dissimilar to those of our own. At Concept, we strive always to provide value for money and a value engineered solution. Our risk assessment and method statements are always considerate of the environment and very sympathetic to the local area and what we're working in. We embrace the principles of equality and diversity, as well as fairness, inclusion and respect, and are committed to maintaining a positive, safe and enjoyable work environment. Can we move on, Olivia? At Concept, we have a very strong culture that embraces equality, diversity and inclusion, and we have very robust training plans for every single member of our staff. So can you click on? Thanks. Our business systems also are reflected in our accreditations that we hold. As Matt and Michael have mentioned before, the importance of construction line and also CHAS and the various other accreditations. So having these accreditations allowed us to work within the public sector projects such as HS2 and also on track related projects, exactly what HS2 is. You can click on. And we had also already been in receipt of various awards for our work, so that we knew that we were capable of delivering safe, high quality ground investigation services to HS2. But we didn't know quite how to convey this in the right way to secure works with HS2 and their supply chain partners. And we didn't know how to get onto the supply chain in the first instance, and then once on, how to be recognised there amongst the likes of the major players. So if you can click on Olivia. We directly asked HS2. We approached them via the website and also attended events such as this and supply chain engagement events as much as possible so that we could learn about the scheme, about HS2 Limited, about the people involved and the precise needs of the scheme and tailor our offering to HS2 Limited. And we also learned how to get involved with all of the different contractors. First of all, to do this, we needed to be registered with Compete4, who is, as Michael and Matt have already said, the HS2 supply chain partner. So, if you can click on, so we went on to Compete4 and we registered our details. It's all basic information about the company, the location, number of staff, turnover, etc. And then we set up alerts with keywords that would be used in a search to find contract opportunities relevant to our own service provision. And sure enough, it wasn't long before we received notification of ground investigations that were required in London. The opportunity came from Skanska Costain Strabag, or CSCS, SCS joint venture. Knowing the importance that HS2 and their supply chain place on local supply chain and local resources employing local people, we were very keen to secure the southern section of HS2 work in London, as this is where our original yard, depot and testing laboratories were based. So if you could skip on. In our bid for the works, we ensured that our proposal reflected and addressed not only all the requirements that, of service provision for the ground investigations, but also the wider project requirements, such as competence local supply chain, sustainability, value engineering, and of course, value for money. We demonstrated that our policies and principles and values were aligned to those of HS2 and the delivery partners, and that we had set targets and objectives which were measurable, and these were recorded and reported. All of this came from researching HS2 and working with their procurement and supply chain, and that's helped us to understand the nuances of bidding for such prestigious projects, and fortunately we were duly rewarded. And you can click on. Olivia? Can we click on? Oh, that's it, thanks. In 2018, we were appointed by SCS joint venture to deliver the additional ground investigation works for HS2 southern sections S1 and S2. And we have been completing these works ever since, providing them from local resources in and around London. From the onset of our appointment, we were welcomed into the SCS joint venture team, working together at all levels with a one team, one goal approach. If we can click on Olivia. The lessons that we've learned from working with SCS and HS2 have caused us to make a step change in our own business processes and systems, particularly with financial and cost control and the way we pay our subcontractors. Since working with HS2, we've signed up to the Fair Payments Charter, ensuring our own supply chain is treated fairly and is further cascaded down to their supply chains too. Making sure everybody working on HS2 is paid in accordance with the Fair Payment Charter on time and for what we've achieved with projects. Additionally, the open, honest, transparent communication between all parties of the project community has mitigated risk of project dispute whilst maximising project delivery. And this has driven sustainable innovation and efficiencies throughout the project, which we have learned from and applied to all our operations at Concept with a mantra of measure twice and cut once. So, i.e., get it right first time. This is also applied to problem solving and innovation to further drive efficiencies throughout our operations and business practices, not just on HS2 projects, but across all of our businesses at Concept. Throughout our engagement with HS2, we've been encouraged to grow and build on all aspects of our business, particularly with regards to sustainability. Since working with HS2, we have joined the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and this has helped us recognise greater depth and understanding of what is meant by sustainability, enabling us to develop sustainable business strategies within Concept. At the beginning of our journey, we knew about EDI and sustainability, but working with HS2 and the Supply Chain Sustainability School, we've gained a greater depth and understanding, which has enabled us to put strategies in place that are measurable and reportable, and this helps us to win other major projects and complete pre-qualification questionnaires for and other tenders as well. Oh, can we move on, please, Olivia? Oh, I think we missed a slide, but never mind. We've also managed to, there's a slide missing, but that's right. We've also managed to achieve construction line gold status and also for silver and enhanced charge certification. So we've embraced the sustainability targets to reduce our costs and provide faster delivery and cutting down emissions across all of our business operations. And we've applied all of this, what we've learned from HS2 and the sustainable strategies to grow and expand our business outside of London. We've learned the importance of a local resource and so have established an office and a yard and laboratory at Coventry. So this is now our second base, and this is purposely being built and constructed to facilitate and target future major projects with HS2 and the works in the north. So if you move on, please. We are now absolutely HS2 ready, with a yard capable of receiving 2,500 metres of core samples. And our laboratory, if you move on quite quickly through these, please, Olivia, our UCAS accredited laboratory is ready to accept samples. And click on Olivia, capable of testing samples from phase 2A, which the next phase of ground investigation to take place near Lichfield. And we're capable of not only taking samples from contract 1, but also from contract 2 and contract 3, which will be awarded to other ground investigation contractors. So as you can see, we're absolutely HS2 ready. And if you click on Olivia, not only are we ready in our laboratories, but our staff are also ready. We've employed 7 geotechnical technicians into our lab. If you click on Olivia, you'll see here, this is Jamie. He's our apprentice, our newest recruit into the geotechnical laboratory. And also, if you click on Olivia, I can introduce Vince, who's one of our senior lab technicians. So if you click on Olivia, the final slide.
Natalie, we're running a bit short on time. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. We've been able to refine our business processes and be much more sustainable and expand and grow our business into new geographical regions, namely the West Midlands, to continue the work with HS2 and their delivery partners. Thank you.
Natalie, thank you. Sorry interrupted, but it's absolutely fascinating how you transformed your company from 2 employees not that many years ago to what it is now and what it will be. I've just had a message that the Mayor's office has managed to sort his technology problems, and I think it was only right. This is Andy Street's idea that we have this summit, and I think it would be wrong if we've got the opportunity not to hear from the man himself. So Andy, if you can hear us and you can talk to us, please, we'd really like to have your views on HS2 and everything that goes with it.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. And Steve, thank you for stepping manfully into dealing with everything. And my humble apologies to everybody. I'm actually not in my office. That was perhaps the mistake. I'm up at a subcontractor's in Bilston. and they've got a brilliant story, but unfortunately, the technology has let us down. Now, first thing to say is it was my idea to do this back in April. I spoke to the chair of HS2 Limited about doing this, and we said, oh, by October, we'll all be able to come together. We won't have to worry about doing it all virtually. And of course, how wrong we were, but had we come together, we'd have escaped all this. But it's been brilliant over the last hour and a bit just to listen to everybody else presenting. I'm going to rattle through my slides very quickly. Remember, they were supposed to be the opening. They're a bit out of order because in a sense, they should have come before all the contractors, not at the end. But we'll rattle through it quickly, and I'll ask Olivia to move them on each time I say. So next slide, please. So it all started, the journey started back in 2014. I described it as simpler times. There's George Osborne out in China telling us we've got to be like China with having a high-speed network rather than what he found himself in his ubiquitous hard hat there. Onward, please, Olivia. And then, of course, we had all our efforts to get the region behind this. As Steve said in a few words earlier on, we were both running the Greater Birmingham Solihull Left at the time. We saw this as an absolutely transformational opportunity for the West Midlands. And in a sense, today is the proof of this as these contracts come home in all sorts of ways, everything from catering, childcare, right up to all of the civils. But the key point to make here on the next slide, is of course that HS2 has already been benefiting our economy. Once it was announced for the first time in 2015, it actually really kick-started the growth of our economy in anticipation. And this picture from The Guardian, of course, I love stories from The Guardian, don't I? This one gives the relative growth of different parts of the country over the last few years. And you see we are glowing red with London as the best. And my simple argument is HS2 has played a part in that. Onward. But at the same time as that was happening, our opponents were gathering together, the Stop HS2 Brigade, the Taxpayers Alliance, Onward. And so we had some work to do to persuade people. Next slide, please. Olivia, next slide. So we had some work to do to persuade people that we should go ahead. Doug Oakerby was the chair of the review panel meeting this time last year, gave a clear recommendation to the government. I was lucky enough to be on it. And as we know, the Prime Minister had a decision to make, and it did literally go to him. Slide on again, please. And we all did our bit, as Steve also said earlier, in lobbying to make sure that the right decision was taken. And so on again, please, Olivia, we find that in 2020, the Prime Minister came to Birmingham to announce that we would definitely giving the go ahead. So let's then have a little look. I was asked to set all this in the context of COVID. So on again, please, Olivia. 2 slides. So the simple point here is we were doing well as a region pre-COVID, and lots of you in the construction industry were certainly doing well. This slide shows the growth in employment across the West Midlands over the last decade, really encouraging. However, we know we've had, on again please Olivia, we've had a hard kick from COVID. This simple graph shows the reduction in GDP by different sectors, and you see the construction sector there. And then on again please. And we know that our region is particularly vulnerable to COVID because of the mix of its economy. Manufacturing, higher education, business tourism or exhibitions, all sectors under pressure. So we know we have got a real challenge. On again, we have responded to that challenge with putting forward what we call our recharge document, telling the world how we will fight back. And critical point, on again, HS2 is right at the heart of that fight back. This is a simplified version of one of the pages in that document, and it positions HS2 as absolutely at the heart of the regional fight back. So if it was important before COVID, it is even more important now, because we have got literally tens of billions of pounds being spent in this region as part of the fight back. Onward then. So let's have a little bit more look at what actually the role of HS2 is in the recovery. And of course, the base case for HS2 still stands. It's a once in 100 years investment. It's not about how the economy is today. It's long term. It's about trade between our different areas. It's about rebalancing between the north and the south of the country. But I think there are 3 things to pull out in terms of what was to be the context of today. Next slide. And the 3 areas where it will drive our economy, and I'll talk about the 3 very briefly: regeneration, connectivity, and skills and jobs. So let's have a little look at the regeneration one. If you can move on 2 slides, that's it. The regeneration one. This, of course, is the aerial view of UKC. the site around Interchange Station in Solihull, quite frankly, the best development opportunity in the whole country, if not in Europe at the moment. And we've got to think really big about making the most of that. And the next slide just illustrates one of the big pieces of thinking, a lovely example of how people have already taken advantage of HS2 coming. The airport bringing forward its master plan, substantial investment for its growth. Now, obviously, there's another whole story about how that now is, but it illustrates the sort of ambition that was going on in the regenerative thinking. And then the next slide, please. If you look to the city centre, our other station rather than Solihull, the regeneration effects around east side. The central station at Curzon Street, the image on the right, is the recently released planning application, I think, from Oval Estate, talking about what they're doing to their vast area in Digbeth. Another proof point that even if the contract isn't with HS2 itself, there is vast economic upside on the back of this. And then bringing us right up to speed, one more slide on, the images released last week. This is of the new Health Innovation Campus in Edgbaston. Over £200 million of private sector investment, all on the back of this encouraging point about the Birmingham and the West Midlands being right at the heart of the nation. And then if you want a slightly different way of seeing the regenerative benefits, this is about people rather than buildings, number of young Londoners moving to the West Midlands, again, all on the back of the opportunities here. So we see that regeneration happening. Then if we move on again, the connectivity, we know of this, the connectivity is coming and it all spans out from the HS2 terminal stations, the buildings in Wolverhampton and of course in Coventry to improve the stations there, onward again. The investments, onward, the investments then in our own local rail network. You see all of the new lines incorporated there, all linking through to the HS2 structure because of the freeing up of capacity on our existing network. And then onward again, HS2 also being a catalyst for innovation in our transport, thinking about new modes of transport, focusing around there, and of course such things as mobility on demand, as it's called. So lots of innovation on the back of this. And onward again, coming to the wider picture, if we're successful in driving people onto public transport, obviously a critical contribution to our wider environmental objective that we call carbon neutrality by 2041. So lastly then, let's get to the jobs that come through the contracting, which is supposed to be the perfect pass on to Mark. So apologies once again for being out of order. The numbers are already clear. 12,000 jobs already attributed to HS2, some through the direct contractors, those of whom you've already heard from. And then a lovely slide next, actually. These jobs are actually reaching people who've missed out on occasions before. This was also from the day of opening when we heard that some of the main contractors like Lynch, for example, and some of their colleagues taking people who've been homeless in Birmingham before, giving them a new start in life as contractors for those schemes. Just a brilliant thought. And then slightly more widely, penultimate slide, there are jobs as well in adjacent sectors, tourism, business tourism there, they will come as well if we improve our relative performance. And then onward, so we're now getting right into the guts of us thinking about how we will actually prepare and train people for those jobs, whether it be in the college, the skills factory, the Women into Construction programme that is being run by HS2, or indeed providing T-levels in the right skill sets for Walsall College. So it is genuinely all happening. And then the final reflection, which was supposed to tee Mark up personally, that in tough times, perhaps HS2 is one very bright spot at the end of a tunnel. It's a long time till the tunnel is completed and built, and we're all celebrating the first train. But my goodness, as the speakers who've come before me have now demonstrated, there are so many opportunities along the way. And that hopefully is a quick canter through, Steve, and what I wanted to say to tee up the day. But most important message is I genuinely hope that to the hundreds of people who've come online, they will go away thinking there's an opportunity for my business in these contracts.
Andy, thank you. Can I just ask before you leave, this summit is the first, is it intended that there will be more of these or similar events to help SMEs coming from your office?
Whether it be my office and of course HS2 together. So I think we will reflect, and of course it'd be great to have some feedback, not necessarily on the technology, but on the content and of the value of it. But I think there's a really important job to be done to get businesses to understand what opportunities there are. And in a tough business environment, that's why we're doing this. I hope we will be able to do it again, because the opportunities will move on slightly. Different phases of this, different things will come into focus.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. We must move on. Actually, we're receiving questions as we go through the summit. And if I just share one with you that's come in. Andy was actually speaking from a subcontractor in Bilston, and somebody's asked the question, how important is Wi-Fi as a part of engaging with HS2? Which I think is a little tongue-in-cheek, but there we go. Now, if we move into the final section around opportunities and support, it's great that we've got Robert Slater with us from HS2, who's going to go through and give an overview of the opportunities and how you can engage.
Thank
Robert.
you, Steve. Yes, hello all. Hopefully you can hear me nice and clearly. So I'm just going to pick up a bit of from every presentation that we've had, really. So kind of just starting from the back of Mark Thurston and Andy Street is that, the real focus of here is obviously we know the opportunities for businesses when HS2s arrive, but it's also about, gaining those opportunities while we build them. So I'm just going to guide you through kind of what HS2 is buying, what it has bought, what the opportunities going forward. So kind of touching on what Michael and Matt have talked about with Mailbox, but also looking forward to a lot of our other categories, just so that kind of everyone's aware of kind of the pipeline as well, because there's a lot of things and different skills needed as we go through the program. So first of all, just touching on kind of the main categories. So HS2 Limited, as I'm sure you're aware, we are the client set up by the DfT to deliver the railway. We took the decision to buy our contracts in kind of for a small number of contracts, but kind of high value. It's probably the most efficient way that we have of engaging with the contracting entities in the UK. And we've broken those down up into enabling works, our main works, as we've kind of touched upon briefly, but then also to build our stations. We've got 4 new stations, which I'll touch on a bit, as well as our rolling stock, the actual trains. We need a fleet of 155 high-speed trains to operate for phase 1 and 2A, and also our railway systems. So I'm going to go through them kind of one by one. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll just touch and kind of give you that final overview for the main work civils contracts. And these are who we've heard from today. So our main work civils contains a lot of most of the pure civil engineering that we need on the project. And as Michael said, that gives us everything kind of up to a track bed to put on the tractor train to run on. The contractors are all listed here. So in the south, we've got SES, who are doing a lot more tunnelling around London, Align as well, doing some tunnelling through the Chilterns, EKFB and BBV we've heard from, and kind of their respective scopes. It's interesting to touch on just because of the variety of work. As I said, in the south it's more tunnel focused, so organisations with expertise around tunnelling, that's kind of where the opportunities lies, where there's a lot more structures and earthworks as we go through the more central and into the Midlands. And that's giving you a kind of a quick flavour. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see where the opportunities are within all of this. And this is just a tip of the iceberg, as again we've heard from Matt and Michael on some of the things that are coming more quicker within our main work supply chains. But again, it's also important to remember these contracts are going to be going on for 5 to 7 years. So although there's opportunities in the next, say, 12 to 18 months, there's more opportunities in those things that you'd expect further down the construction timeline as the project progresses. So although something applicable to your business might not be appearing, say, now or the next 6 to 12 months, please don't be too alarmed. As I say, this is a long program. I think Mark referenced the 20-year construction period. There's opportunities as we go through the construction for our main works. If I just move on to the next slide then. Similar skills, however, will be required for our stations. And we've got 4 stations for phase 1 of the project. We've got 2 in the south, London Euston and Old Oak Common. We now actually have contractors on board for those, and they're starting to mobilise and deliver work. We've got contractors called Maestrigados for the Euston station and BBVS, so 2 entities from Matt's JV for Old Oak Common. And they're running their own engagement for local businesses around there, but also, again, looking for those skills and specialist requirements that can be delivered from the West Midlands or indeed anywhere in the country. So they're embarking on their supply chain engagement. In terms of in the Midlands, we've got Birmingham Curzon Street and Birmingham Interchange, and they're all in different stages of procurement. So we're in the middle of trying to get contractors on board to deliver them. Obviously, Birmingham Curzon Street will be the actual absolute jewel in the crown of the HS2 network, and it's great design, great development. But we've got tenders on board, or tenders, sorry, underway. We've got 3 contractors who are bidding for this piece of work. I'll touch more about who they are in a minute. And then Interchange, we're just working out our final procurement strategy to get tenderers and therefore contractors on board. If we move to the next slide. And on here, we're going to just run through our railway systems. So railway systems is very technically focused, but it's all of the systems that we require to get trains to run on the track at 225 miles an hour, pretty close to each other to achieve our operating requirements. And we've broken these down into about 7 packages, and I'll just run through them left to right. So first of all, we've got the track, which does, is pretty simple. So it includes the rail for the trains to run on, but also the slab track to hold the track there. Secondly is the OCS, the overhead catenary systems. So the pylons basically to enable the train to run. And obviously they require HV power, so the power to power the trains, put it simply. In between those, we have our tunnel and line side M&E packages, which cover all of the mechanical and engineering fit out basically for the track. So ensuring that we've got our cross passage doors to block up between the tunnels in case of any fire incident, but also kind of ensuring that all the cables are fitted accurately to the tunnels. Next, we have our telecoms, so ensuring, first of all, that we've got our operational comms, so that all the things the train needs to work, or that the radio is back to base, but also ensuring that all passengers will be able to get Wi-Fi and 4G, or hopefully 5G by the time we're operational. So it's a really good package there, and lots of kind of technical stuff to do, as well as our CCS, our command, control, and signaling package. Put it simply, is a signaling package, but not how you might anticipate. This is all done digitally through the cab of the train. And lastly, got the depot, Washford Heath, where the trains can be stabled, and the NICC, where the trains are controlled from. As it says on the slide, lots of these are in live procurement, so HS2 are actually procuring our contractors now. And if this is something that your organisation feels like they can actually deliver, this is where the speciality of your organisation lies. Opportunities will be arising. But first thing first is that we need to award the contracts for this, and then we'll be able to detail how the subcontracts will be coming out over the next year or two. So there's a lot of work that's been going on to get them this far, and they're very technologically advanced and interesting. But I'll touch on the final slide about a bit more information on how to get involved. And then the next slide, please, Livia. And then obviously, if we look forward for the programme, this is not just connecting the West Midlands to London and the opportunities for local businesses in this region itself, but there's also the opportunities for the delivery of the rest of the project. And this is where I mean, like thinking about HS2 in your pipeline. I think Natalie referenced this in terms of looking for work on phase 2A, but also there's the work to come up on phase 2B. So phase 2A is the bit of the route from around just north of Birmingham to Crewe, about 50 kilometres of railway, and we're starting to procure the works for that now. We're going to be procuring a design and delivery partner, so somebody to manage a lot more of the works for us than has been done with phase 1, but also then our works contracts. So the main contracts, similar to the main civils works along phase 1, on 2A. So again, it's really important to remember this kind of phasing, as I talked about to begin with, that although phase 1 itself is a really big opportunity, and the work that's being delivered now will be different to in a couple of years' time, then the railway systems, and then the rolling stock. That whole process repeats itself for phase 2A and then 2B. So if hypothetically your organisation do some enabling works but missed out on phase 1, well, there's opportunities further north in the route. And I think that's a really interesting point to pick up on, and just to consider HS2 in your programme and your 5-year, 10-year plans, is that there's going to be opportunities as the programme moves forward. On the next slide, just a few kind of tips. I'm sure this slide deck will be sent around to people. on terms of getting to know HS2. I think Natalie picked up on this really quite well, as well as Michael and Matt, and it's really just understanding about HS2 and what we're trying to achieve. Obviously, we're trying to achieve building the railway within budget and to time, so time budget are really key drivers for us. But it's also a lot of understanding of our wider themes. Mark referenced, for example, carbon. It's a low high-speed rail even is a low carbon method of transport, but it's actually reducing the carbon in how we build it. So if your organisation does really forward-thinking things in terms of carbon reduction, that is something that's going to be really useful in building our main civils contracts, and something that I'm sure that our contractors would be really interested in hearing about. We've touched on compete for as well, and I'll talk more about that in my final slide. But as well, for some of these other packages, it's really worth considering if there's opportunities to work directly for HS2 for bigger packages by working with partners, or as well as positioning yourself as best as you possibly can. What we'd always recommend doing now, and just to surmise from all of our presentations, is understanding more about HS2, and the best start for that is going on the HS2 website, hs2.org.uk. Within that, there's a dedicated supply chain section with a supplier guide FAQ document, so more about understanding HS2 as a project, all the things we've spoken about today, but also better to getting to know HS2 and those things that are really important to us, as I've touched on. Using the industry resources, supply chain sustainability school, and working with your local LEP, your chambers of commerce, or trade associations for specialist industries are really important, and we as HS2 use those a lot to disseminate our messaging. Lastly, I really want to kind of focus on compete for here, and that second panel. So competefor.com/HS2. Compete for is the brokerage platform, as you say. It's, we can often refer to as say Tinder for businesses, but really it's where our contractors and some of their subcontractors post opportunities. You express your interest in that, and then you're taken through to the relevant procurement portal. So it's that shop front for opportunities, and it's really important that you register on that. I know Michael and Matt both said it, but just to reiterate, we wrote it into their contracts for our main works contractors to use this portal, and that will be the same for stations as well as for railway systems. Again, on our website, always encourage people to have a look there. We've got a supply chain map, so you can see where organisations are that have won work on the project. I think at last count we had 316 businesses from the West Midlands that won work on the project. So that, getting up for about a sixth of our total supply chain to date since 2013, and that's really good. But something that we obviously want to see increase. Lastly, we've got our supply chain mailbox. And if there's anything that you've read about on our website and you've heard us talk about today that hasn't been answered, obviously you can send us an email and we'll do our best to get back to you within 5 working days. So that's been my kind of whistle-stop tour through the other opportunities with HS2, hopefully a bit more context of the project, and I'll hand back to Steve.
Rob, that was very helpful. Thank you very much. And we will now finish on having heard the opportunities on the support that is available to SMEs, and I'm very pleased that we've got Phil Peake from the Coventry and Warwickshire Growth Hub with us. Phil, the floor is yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Steve. I'm on between everybody and their lunch, so I'll be as quick as I possibly can now. I'm the Operations Director of the Warwickshire Growth Hub. I'm speaking on behalf of all the West Midlands Growth Hubs, and how we can help you engage with opportunities and build your capacity and capabilities. As the slide there shows, there's a number of ways facilities to spend some time with you to understand where your business is at and what things you need to consider to actually be in a position that you are a business that is capable of bidding for HS2 work and other projects as well, which I'll come on to. As Natalie talked about earlier, she had to invest in their business, had to move and create new property, improve the skills in their business. All those factors are there as we can help with. And procurement, not just in terms of finding the opportunities that come out from HS2, but how you can profile yourself as a business with the businesses in the region. Rob there talked about the potential collaboration between businesses, and I think that's a key thing we'll touch on. Will you look at the next slide, please? Thank you. So we'll just approach it. There's 3 growth hubs in the Combined Authority region. We're one of a network of 38 growth hubs around the country. but the Greater Birmingham, Solihull, Black Country and Coventry and Warwickshire, we've worked very closely with the Combined Authority on the HS2 project right from the start. So we'll come back to the contact details a little later on, as how you can engage with those growth hubs and we can help you through the journey. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the examples of the areas of support we get involved in talking to businesses about. And it's never one thing. There's always a multitude of areas that we end up talking to businesses about. This year clearly is about helping businesses just get through what has been the most difficult year, I'm sure, in living memory for all of us. But how you can then look forward and beyond this year and invest in your business and provide an opportunity going forward. So these are just some of the areas that we explore. I think a key point around business support, most businesses right now are considering how they have to remodel their business for the future. So it's an opportunity to revisit your business plans, look at diversifying your business. And we can certainly, that's an area we spend a lot of time talking about. Olivia, please. And just again, an example. Thank you. Just from twice more. Thank you. So building information modelling, or BIM, is an area that has not been touched on, I don't think, today, but actually is a key requirement for the HS2 projects. All construction partners and suppliers on the projects have to have a level of BIM compliance. Now, some companies are very well equipped on that, some simply are not and need to actually understand where they're at in that journey. I think again, once more, Olivia, please. We can get you support from, for example, universities locally. They actually have support around BIM you need to consider. But as both Natalie and Rob touched on, other areas such as diversity and sustainability are areas that you need to prepare for and actually have policies and procedures in place to be able to be considered as a supplier into the project. Next slide, please, Olivia. Well, just points now, and I'll skim over this very quickly. There's a peer networks program. This is an opportunity to meet your peers, meet your fellow suppliers and build relationships, as Rob touched on, that are going to be needed to actually collaborate and engage with projects such as HS2. And also, right now, obviously, we're coming towards the end of our relationship with the EU, and many companies need to actually understand what they need to do to prepare for life beyond our membership of the EU, so that support we can engage you with. Next slide, please, Olivia. Worth reflecting on the context of HS2 in the West Midlands. HS2 is one of many investments and projects that are going on across the Midlands right now. Connectivity, things like the Metro Alliance project in the west of the region, but other major construction projects for the councils, the LEPs, other public sector capital works. And then we look at things like Commonwealth Games and the City of Culture just around the corner now. I think 5G is clearly underpinning all of this, and obviously today has obviously reflected the need for that. And so if we just click on the next slide, just to, thank you. So one of the things that we've part of is a Find It In network. This has been established for a few years now, so there is a Find It In platform in each area of the region. And just this year alone, there's been £25.9 billion worth of opportunities posted through that platform. It is not an alternative to Compete For. Compete For is the platform that all HS2 opportunities come through. Think of it as an umbrella that reflects all those opportunities and many more from many other sources as well. So I'd also encourage you to actually have a look at it and position yourself on that. And it's also an opportunity to reflect and promote yourselves horizontally to fellow businesses as well as vertically through the supply chain and build those relationships. There's already over 90,000 members on the Find It network. So please do have a look at that as well as an option. And the next slide, please. And it is just the last point there. There is no cost to register and access opportunities on Find It at all. So we can certainly help you and have a look at that as a way to actually position yourselves and profile yourselves into a wider audience. And multiple projects. Slide, please. Natalie's one example. There's another example here. Water National Infrastructure Consultants, small business based in Ulster in Warwickshire. It was mentioned earlier about the ecology side of HS2 Glenmark, the trees on the lines of HS2. They've actually got the contract to develop and plant all those trees along the route. So that's just an example of a small business that has engaged with HS2 successfully, and we've helped them do that along that journey. Next slide, please. So those are the contact websites for each of the 3 growth combined authority region. We'd be happy to talk to any business on the call today to see how we can help moving forwards. And thank you very much for your time. I'll keep this short and sweet as I can, Steve.
You did a very good job, Phil. Well done. No, thank you. We've eaten into the time that was actually allocated for question and answers. I am just going to take one question. It's the most commonly asked question during the course of this summit. And it's actually going to be addressed to Michael from EKFB. You mentioned about hotels and the need to procure more hotel space. The question, Michael, is what do those who are in that position and can supply? Where do they go? What do they do? How can they push their case? Is Michael unmuted? Michael, can you hear?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I did. Thanks, Steve. No problem. So a couple of routes, I suppose. The first point, and it sound like a broken record, but compete for is absolutely crucial for companies to get registered on there. But I think for something like the bed and breakfast and sort of tourism type hotel opportunities, we are doing those separately. So we're engaging with local LEPs. There's actually, and I'll get the link shared around, but there's a HS2 local business register where you can register as a business. You can detail the type of services that you provide, and then we track and share that. So I can look at the local hotels that are close to our section of work. We've also done some engagement with maybe some of the bigger hotel providers. There's a new Hilton that just opened near Bicester, and we were at the opening event. We have some on-site accommodation that we're procuring ourselves, but the piece of work that we're really trying to focus on is that capacity piece of what's available locally, and that's done via our engagement through local LEPs. There's a bit of research, I think, from our point of view that we're trying to tap into local providers. I'm happy to share my details, so if there's companies and people that want to get in touch with me directly, happy to support. There's an interesting balance with hotels and bed and breakfasts, especially in our section, in that central section. We're conscious that we don't want it to impact, the potential tourism capacity of the hotels that currently exist. So it's an interesting balance where we're looking at the availability or potential availability of whether it's hotels or bed and breakfast, and then seeing where we can almost come up with like a very simple, not booking system, but a simple approved list of providers that our contractors or our employees can then have access to. So yeah, happy to share my contact details. I'm sure Rob can get the HS2 business register link shared as well. And to repeat, compete for is absolutely crucial to get registered on there.
Michael, no, thank you. As I mentioned, we've actually received a lot of questions during the course of the summit, and the intention now is that the Mayor will write to all attendees. He will share with you copies of the slides from all the presentations, and for those who have asked questions, you will receive a direct response to those, and if there's any common themes, we'll pick that up in his message back to everybody. So it just leaves it to me to bring the summit to a conclusion. Can I thank all of our speakers? It's been absolutely fascinating, a run through on such a massive project, and it also, I must thank those who have been listening, and again, apologies for the technology issues, but hopefully as a result of this, for those who are not engaged with HS2, it's given you some food for thought, and it is the Mayor's intention that he will be looking at with his team ways in which we can really stir it for the SMEs in the Midlands region. This is a once in a generation opportunity, and it's there to be taken. So on behalf of everybody who's been a part of the summit, thank you, and I wish you every success in your businesses, wherever and whatever they may be doing. Thank you.
it